psychological needs that are just as valuable and important as physical needs. Like, we know we have needs for nutrients, we know have needs for water. We have needs psychological for all sorts of different things. Our communities are incredibly important. Love is incredibly important. Family is incredibly important. You know, I know some people that are older men that have been bachelors their whole lives, and they're childless, and now they're, you know, they don't have a deep connection with anybody, and they get to this very weird, strange place where they're like, is this it? Now I'm 70 years old, and I've never really had children, and I don't know what to do, and this is my life now. And they've all their friends have had families now, and their families, a lot of times the kids are grown up, and it becomes very, very strange.
You know, I thought about that a lot. I interviewed this guy, Professor John Cassiopo at the University of Chicago, who's the leading expert in the world on loneliness. And he said this thing to me that it's a bit like what the woman in Geneva said.
What a lonely way to live your life.
He's actually quite a cheerful person, actually. But he had this really interesting, this really simple point. But he just said, if you think about the circumstances where we evolved, right? If you got separated from the tribe, if you were alone, right, you were depressed and anxious for a really fucking good reason. You were about to be eaten, right? Yes. You were in terrible danger. If you got injured, no one would help you, you would die, right? So he showed that, so when, as you know, when we're stressed, we release a hormone called cortisol. He showed this really interesting experiment that I wrote about in the book. Being acutely lonely is as stressful as being punched in the face by a stranger when it comes to cortisol release, right? That's how deeply we are resistant to loneliness, right? It's a signal telling you to get back to the tribe. That's why we evolved. It's a really important signal. If humans hadn't had that signal, we wouldn't be here, right? And I think you're right. So when you look at these men, if you have an isolated, there was this woman, so I covered this incredible protest movement that happened in Berlin on a big anonymous housing project where no one knew each other, and they came together to protest. It was a woman who was about to kill herself because she was about to be evicted. And the whole housing project came together to say she should be allowed to stay in her home and they should have a rent freeze. And it's an amazing story, I tell it in the book, but there's something one of the women said to me that I never forgot. She's called Neriman. She'd grown up in Turkey and she'd come to Germany, I think when she was 17. She said, when I grew up in Turkey, what I called my home was my village and everyone in it. And then I came to live in the Western world and I learned that what you're meant to call home is just your four walls, and if you're lucky, your family. And then this protest began, and we all got to know each other, and this whole place became my home. And I think of everywhere here as home now. And she realized that we are homeless in some sense in the Western world, that us humans have a need for a sense of belonging. And our sense of home is too small to meet our sense of home belonging. There's a wonderful Bosnian writer called Alexander Heyman who said, home is where people notice when you're not there, right? And a lot of us, like these guys you're talking about, these older guys, who notices if they're not there?
Right.
Probably no one.
Probably
they are,
no
in
one.
a sense, homeless, right? They are spiritually homeless. And I say that as I'm not a religious person, I don't mean that.
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. It's very important.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And so I think it's about, and this comes back to, think about how different that is, what everything we're talking about, think how different our conversation has been to what my doctor told me when I was a teenager. And I go in and I say, I'm in real pain and I feel like pain is leaking out of me and I can't control it. And he says, you've just got a malfunction in your brain, right? One of the worst things about that, there are many things wrong with that. Firstly, what he said to me is not true. I'm sure he believed it. I think he was misinformed. I don't think he was deliberately lying to me. But what he said was not true. But also, to me, the biggest problem with just telling this exclusively biological story about depression and anxiety, there's some real biological factors, of course, is it cuts us off from having this conversation, right?